Hey everybody, my name is Paulo and I'm going to talk to you about tech. So primarily I plan on talking about Linux, but there's other things up on the table for sure with programming and Python and Bash scripting, or even I'm really trying to dive into Rust. So those topics are certainly on the table as well for future videos. But today I just wanted to talk a little bit about who I am, where I'm coming from, my experience with Linux, what my project is that I'm working on right now, and then wrap this video up. So to start, who am I? Well, I've been using Linux as my daily driver for about 2 years now. Before that, my first experience with Linux was probably in the late 90s when I went to Target and found Red Hat on a CD, and it was like $30 to purchase. And so I bought that and took it home and dual booted it with my Windows desktop. I think I bought a big Linux how-to book at the same time, probably an O'Reilly book. And that was my first experience with Linux. I didn't stick with it. I went back to using Windows full time. In the next few years, in the early 2000s, I ran Gen 2 on and off a couple of times. And then I didn't really touch Linux for quite a while until I went back to school and I started using Linux Mint and Ubuntu. But even those, Windows has games, and even at that time, the operating system was just, it looked nicer. Windows looked nicer, Mac looked nicer. And it wasn't until 2 years ago when I installed Manjaro and saw the state of KDE Plasma that I was blown away. And I made that decision almost immediately to transition full-time to Linux and get rid of the Windows altogether. Now I am running Windows VM, and I do it through VFIO, and I have a nice Looking Glass setup, and I'll probably talk about that in a future video. But what really got me to start using Linux full-time was that Manjaro experience. After that, I've tried many different distros, Garuda, Artix. Right now I'm running Fedora, and I've tried a little bit with Debian, but Pop! OS and my VPN just were not playing well together. And I didn't really try any other Debian. I'm not super interested. Mostly I just wanted to play with Nala and use Nala, which is the only reason I was even flirting with Debian in the first place. So that is a little bit about how I got to where I'm at. My current project is, I've been wanting to get into window managers. So I've made little stabs, at Xmonad, but I'm not a functional programming guy. I'm not a Haskell guy. I found that to be very difficult and not very rewarding. I then saw a video about LeftWM, and I tried LeftWM, and this was about a year ago, and I really liked it, but I just didn't have the time to get into it. At the time, for the past 10 years, I was working in the tech industry, and I just really didn't have the time. But I left the tech industry a few months back. I honestly, at the end of it, thought I didn't even like technology anymore. I did not have a good experience, but that's a tale for another day. Right now, what's important is that in these past few months, I've rediscovered a love for computing, and that's mostly due to Linux and just playing with my Linux system. And which is why I primarily want to focus on Linux. And so I have now put some time, in the past couple of weeks, I've put a lot of time into my LeftWM config. So let's just take a look and see what we got here. and we'll discuss this briefly and wrap this video up. So here's kind of the base starting point of this config. We can see that I did customize the tags a little bit. Oops. And this really was just an idea stolen from the Garuda guys in their Qtile edition. They call the tags the Greek letters here, which I thought was kind of fun. We got a little reading on our current layout, time, this little fun CPU monitor, and this RAM gauge, both of which are really not very useful, but they're just kind of fun to look at from time to time. HTOP would be much better if you actually need to look at any real information. And then we got these little buttons over here that does work because we are on the left side of my monitor, or right side of my monitor, excuse me. But right now, my Rofi config treats my whole monitor as one monitor, but left WM, you're only seeing one workspace, which is half my monitor. So let's open this, and we can see that, like I don't know if I mentioned, but I am running Fedora Cinnamon Spin right now. We're not in Cinnamon, obviously. We are running left WM. I've done some theming and icon customization, which was honestly one of the harder things to do, and it took me watching the Arco Linux guys, their videos on left WM to get the idea that there is on the specific thing to install that would give me access to that. And one thing that probably is kind of annoying about that is it's called customize in this desktop profile, but that's not what it's called. It's like LX something or other. I have to look that up. But it does work really well, and it allowed me to finally config PCMan so that when I'm looking at something like PCMan, I can have a nice theme. I can see the icons. We can see, you know, we have this Avidity Total Dusk. The icon theme is this Papyrus Dark. And this mouse cursor theme is Volantes. I really like this mouse cursor theme. It's just slick and simple. Nothing crazy fancy. But this application, I'm going to have to look up its name, was one of the harder parts to figure out. And of course, I've never used Polybar or anything before this, but people have their configs, and if you've done programming and stuff for a while, you can take a config and generally read it a little bit and figure out how to manipulate it and change it around to your liking. So this is my desktop. I'm really pleased with the way it is at this point. I'm pretty happy with it, and I'm ready to go forward with it. There are, like I mentioned, right now the desktop is split into two sides. I don't normally run it that way. Normally I run it as one ultra wide. So, but there are a couple of different configurations, and for, I would guess, most window managers, but for left in particular, this means I have multiple config.ron files. So I wrote a script that helps me transition when I want to do that, because there's a whole bunch of things to do, not just reactivating with two workspaces, but potentially changing the resolution through xrandr, and also changing some other left stuff, such as the layout, to be a layout that looks nice in 1080 versus 3840. So there's a few things, so that's why I created that script. Also, I wrote a big Python script that syncs different sections of the configs, because there are certain sections, like the window settings, that, you know, control things like if a window starts it as a floating window, or what tag it starts on, that you want synced probably all the time. And then also the key bindings, which ultimately I should use a third-party tool that manages the key bindings, but for now, this was the solution I did, and plus it was just a fun little excuse to write a little Python. And so that is my desktop. That's where I'm at. Next time we'll probably dive into one or both of those scripts. And thank you for watching. Please leave any comments or whatever in the comment section below. Thank you.